Hi and welcome to Artful Loving. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the most crucial element of human relationships, boundaries and consent. Two of the most important things you can ever learn, and unfortunately two of the most important things that people are often really not very good at. So stick around and hopefully this is really useful for you. Hi, I'm Nick Tovey. Thank you for being here. If you want to learn a little bit more about me and my work, head to nicktovey.com. And why not come and join us over at Patreon and being part of a community and get Patreon only experiences and content. And of course, subscribe. Boundaries. Let's just talk about boundaries for a moment. What are boundaries? You know, these are... If you've paid any attention to any of popular culture, any relationship coaching, anything like that in the world at the moment, you're going to hear the conversation around boundaries and consent. Consent is, of course, a really big deal at the moment when you think about the cultural context in which we're in, the Me Too movement and all of that surrounds that. Consent, of course, is a really big deal at the moment that we're exploring, we're navigating, we're trying to get a lot better at. And so we can't fully consent to anything unless we know what we don't like and what our boundaries are. So these two things go together. So what does boundaries mean? Boundaries are the points between us, between me and you. It's where I end and you begin. So of course we have physical boundaries, that the skin that encapsulates our body, that is a physical boundary. If you touch my skin or my body, you without my consent, you are crossing a physical boundary. We also have energetic boundaries. When we feel a person's energy coming towards us in a non-consensual way, that energetic boundary is being crossed. We of course also have emotional boundaries. When somebody is manipulating us emotionally, gaslighting, those sorts of things, that's a crossing of an emotional boundary. And of course intellectual boundaries, when somebody is saying and trying to change the way we think and manipulate the way we think, whether that's consciously or unconsciously. These are all different boundaries we need to be concerned about and in tune with. So how do we know when our boundaries are being crossed? This is the most important thing, is understanding what it is, what it feels like in those moments when a boundary is being crossed. So the most important aspect to get in touch with is our physical sensation. Boundaries are our inbuilt barometer that let us know when we're unsafe, when something unsafe is either happening or potentially going to happen. So when we feel unsafe, there's a sensation that happens in our body. We feel a certain way. So when somebody is trying to ask of you something that you don't feel good about, there's a feeling that goes on in your body. That experience when we've all had it, when we're in a room or we're in a situation and somebody comes close to us and we feel just a little bit icky, a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit like something doesn't feel quite right. That is our inbuilt physiological barometer, nervous system barometer that is saying, it's like an alarm system that's going off. We're unsafe. Something doesn't feel quite right. We need to take note of that. So what often happens is that we feel that experience, but then we override it. We shove it down, we suppress it, or we pretend that it doesn't exist. Yeah, so we end up putting ourselves in situations or allowing things to happen to us that our body is saying a hell no to. So we need to be in touch with that physiological, that sensory experience before we can then make a decision with our mind around how we operate in this particular situation. So like a lot of things that I try to teach, it really comes down to embodiment, about being in the body. So often we are up here, we're in the mind, we're trying to analyze the situation, we're trying to think about what other people think about us, what is this person going to think of me if I say no to this particular thing, or we override these physiological warning signals because of the things we think. And the ideas we have about who we are and how the world is going to interact with us. So our lack of boundaries often leads down to a belief in our self-worth, and therefore, a narrative that goes something like, if I uphold my boundaries, if I stand strong in my center, in myself, and say no to certain things, then people aren't going to love me. People are going to withdraw their love. They're going to abandon me. They're going to walk away. They're going to laugh at me. They're going to humiliate me. Whatever the potential unpleasant experience could be. This is what leads us to override our own boundaries, our own inbuilt warning mechanism to say we are unsafe in this moment. So our practice in order to get better at boundaries is being more in touch and trying to fine-tune that sensitivity to those felt senses, those felt experiences. A beautiful experiment that I like to do with clients when I'm working one-on-one is get my client to stand still as I walk slowly towards them, and get them to feel inside of their body, and to ask me to stop when they start to feel a physiological change happening. Often that is felt in the belly, in the solar plexus area, or in the chest, or even higher up in the throat area. These are those feelings of clench that happen when we're in a state of fear and that something is going to happen, something unsafe is going to happen. So if in this scenario, in this experience, this experiment, if you like, as I slowly walk towards my client, then the client is going to feel some subtle physiological change going on, and then they get to direct me, they get to stop me and put a pause on the situation. And then when they feel, they breathe with the experience, and if it subsides, then they can call me forward and I'll come a little bit closer. If it just feels too overwhelming and they feel that the feeling doesn't go away but it actually exacerbates, then they can send me away, and I'll move further away until their nervous system gets to the point of ease. So this is a really great experiment to use with a friend, with a loved one, and get an idea of what these physiological experiences are, these felt senses, in a controlled and safe environment. So then when you're in a situation, whether it's a sexual situation, whether it's a situation at work, whether it's a situation with family and friends, when people are asking something of you that or putting you into trying to demand something from you that doesn't feel okay, you get to understand. You've got a felt experience. You've got an imprint of what that feels like, so you know the sensation. So then, when you feel that sensation in your lived experience, you can go, hang about, stop. Just pause for a moment. Without responding, without doing anything, just give yourself a moment to pause. Breathe with the experience, get in touch with the felt experience within, and then feel into what is the correct and most appropriate response for you in this moment to lead you towards a place of safety. There's two when it's very much like a compass. I use this terminology of the barometer, and if we move that towards the compass, we've got directions of a compass. So in life, we can move towards desire, and we can move towards fear or away from fear. So these are felt experiences. When you feel in your body what desire feels like, it feels good, it feels open, it feels expansive, it feels pleasurable almost, Where if you imagine moving towards fear, it feels unpleasant, it feels constrictive and contracting. So this is the experience, the felt experience that we want to get in touch with, that helps us move towards what our body says a hell yes to, or what it says a hell no to. So again, what I'm saying is getting in touch with that physiological felt experience is the way for you to start to uphold strong, healthy boundaries. Another important factor when I'm working with people and helping them develop and learn about their own boundaries and how they feel and how to uphold them is the recognition that boundaries are like a double-layered filter. So we have an outer layer that protects us from the world, but we also have an inner layer that protects the world from us. So when we're learning this experience of being strong in our boundaries, saying no to things that don't feel good to us, recognizing that we're a sovereign human being and we have the power and the worth to say no and to lead the life that we feel is right for us, i.e. not what somebody else wants from us. We also need to recognize that we're not only a sovereign being, we're also working in a world. So we have sovereignty, i.e. self, and we also have synergy, i.e. I work as part of an ecosystem, a greater ecosystem. So how I choose to behave and show up in the world has an impact on the world around me. I'm not just an isolated human being without any responsibility or impact on the world around me. That's of course not true. We're part of a greater ecosystem. So what I say and do and how I behave in the world flows on around me. So we need to be aware of how our yeses and nos have an impact on the world around us. That being said, this isn't about saying yes to things that we're not okay with, but it's about recognizing that, okay, when I say no to something, it's going to have a flow-on effect. That doesn't mean I don't say no. It just means I need to be aware of how my no is going to land on the world around me, or land on my partner or my friend or my mother or whoever it is. There's going to be consequences. There's going to be flow-on effects of the boundaries that I uphold. Often what I see is particularly when people are really developing this new skill, this new capacity, and strengthening their ability to feel and sense their no's and their yeses and stand strong and steady in their boundaries and put it out onto the world, they forget the fact that they have an impact. And it's all about them, it's all about upholding their own sovereignty, and forget it, and very much in a self-centered, self-oriented way, we forget that our choices have an impact on the world. It's really, really important. We are part of an ecosystem, and of course, if we're wanting to be in relationship with people, we have to understand that what we say and do is going to have an impact on the world that we live in, the people that we're around. So of course, bring that into a relational context, particularly an intimate relationship. We need to recognize that by me standing strong in my center, in my no's and my yeses, it's all, of course, really, really important that I do that. But this other person is going to feel that. They're going to be impacted by that in some way. So we need to understand and have compassion and understanding around how that's going to feel, so we can navigate that in a healthy and mature and conscientious way. So of course, in the process of finding our no, finding what we're not okay with finding, getting clear in that felt experience of what a no feels like, then we also get to understand what a yes feels like. So in the process of getting clear in what isn't okay, what we don't like, what doesn't feel good, and what we're not willing to put up with anymore, we can also, in the same process, and it's really important that we put some focus on this, is what do we desire? What do we hell yes to? What do we like? What do we enjoy? What do we make a stand for in our relationships, in our life? What is this sort of relating that we want to make a stand for? What is the sort of communication? What are the sort of sexual interactions that we want to engage in? And how can we explore that and find what our yeses are, what we desire, what feels good to us, what feels pleasurable to us, and own that, really own that, and say a hell yes, a fuck yes to whatever it is that is really, really important to us and feels amazing. Yeah. So just as hard as it is to say no to something, it can also be really hard for people to say yes to something that they desire. What are your dreams? What are your fantasies? What are the things that you want to engage in? What do you want to try in your life? Whether this is in a sexual context or just in a big life dream experience. Go sailing around the world, be an entrepreneur, have a threesome, whatever it is that feels exciting and something a little edgy, but of course challenging, but beautiful. How can we say a resounding fuck yes to that and move in the direction of our desires, not only away from our fears? Does that make sense? So of course, everything that I've discussed here is all about finding that inner compass, that inner barometer, and getting in touch with that felt sense around what a yes and what a no feels like. But what then takes those experiences of our boundaries into what consent looks like, the only step then is about communication. It's about saying yes to something or saying no to something, and of course hearing that if you're on the receiving end of that, and understanding it, listening to it, and feeling into what it is to receive a yes or a no from your partner, from your loved one, from your family member. It's not always going to go down very well when we uphold our boundaries, yeah? When we say no to something or we say yes to something, yeah? Sometimes the other person's going to have a reaction to that, and that's okay. What we want to be doing is not protecting that person from their reaction. That's often what gets us in trouble in the first place, is not wanting the other person to have an emotional reaction to us upholding our own boundaries. So we, in a way, try to protect them from their emotional reaction, and of course protect us from their emotional reaction as well. Screw that, yeah? Allow each other to have their emotional reaction, and this is where the two-way boundaries comes into play. Is about understanding that my no, of course, may have an impact on this person, and they may react to it, and that's okay. They're allowed to have their reaction. I don't need to get upset by their reaction. Of course, if they don't respect my no, if they don't listen to my no, and they go ahead and try and do something that I'm a no to, then that's just not okay. That's a breach of my boundaries. That's a breach of my consent. And therefore, I really need to question this relationship and who this person is that I'm in relationship with. And firstly, we need to talk about it. We need to go, hey, when you did this, it didn't feel okay to me. And it felt like you weren't respecting my boundaries. We need to be able to communicate them well and clearly. We can't just assume that another person knows what our boundaries are. That is just crazy. It's not sensible, it's not mature, and it's really not fair. Yeah, we need to be able to communicate clearly what our yeses and our nos are. So we need to know what they are, we need to feel them, and then we need to be able to communicate them and help that other person understand what our yeses and what our nos are. And of course, this is in every arena of life and relationships. This isn't just about sex and intimacy and intimate relationships. This is everything. We're always interacting with other human beings, and therefore we need some level of clarity and understanding around what we're okay with, what we're not okay with, yeah, and then being able to communicate that to people. Of course, really common ways in which this plays out, often not very well, is in family relationships, family dynamics. Often there are expectations that get set up in the early lives of a family, and those expectations get carried on throughout, when the children become adults, and the parents expect the children to behave a certain way without their own maturity, their own value system, things like that, examples such as that. And of course, in a work situation, people taking advantage of people's loyalty and their need for income. Yeah, we can see it happening all the time. There's so many ways in which this plays out. So again, reiterating, finding that inner center where we can feel what a boundary feels like, and then being able to communicate that to each other. Firstly, owning it and ourselves, and then communicating it to another. This is how we are going to healthily navigate boundaries and consent within relationships, all of our relationships. A really awesome tool that I love, and I use it in my own relationships, and I've worked with many clients in workshops and in one-on-one and 1-on-2 sessions, is a tool called Wheel of Consent, and it's created by a woman called Betty Martin. Have a look on YouTube. She's got some great videos around the Wheel of Consent. It's a really fabulous tool to help us understand some of these different dynamics that play out in relationships in general. And then she has a game that you can play called a 3-minute game, which you can use with a partner or a friend and have experiences of giving and receiving levels of touch. And of course, that can be as intimate or not intimate as you wish, yeah? But it's a really great tool to explore some of these dynamics and find out what you're uncomfortable with and what feels good. Yeah, so we get to play with some different edges and some different experiences. So I really recommend this. I'll put a link in the show notes to Betty Martin's videos, so you can check that out and play with it with your partner, with your friends. Okay guys, well, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for being with me today for this video. Any comments, any questions, anything you'd like to share with me, please put them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Again, if you want to engage in this conversation a little deeper, come over to Patreon. I'll put the link in the show notes, and be a part of a community and a deeper conversation. And of course, subscribe. Until the next video, see you later. Keep loving.